Welcome back to Focus Today, and delighted to have back in the studio with us our good friend John Mittendorf, and he'll be with us in just a second. But here's an interesting thought. We hear this term so often, voting for the lesser of two evils. The problem with that is the word evil is in there, and I've had some people come up to me and say, because the word evil is in there, I'm not going to vote. And I think that that in itself creates an incredible problem for a lot of people. We are not happy with these two flawed candidates. It has produced unbelievable responses. I have bumped into a lot of people of faith who are really frustrated with this. Instead of looking at the candidates, they're looking at the issues. And I have to say that I've never seen an election cycle that has engaged more Christian groups, groups of faith-based groups, that where they are encouraging you to vote even though you don't like the candidates. That has clearly been something that has happened around. But one of the things that comes out of this is both of these candidates are flawed in a big, big way. Now, please don't send me a letter about, you know, one versus the other. I'm as frustrated as everybody else is. But there's so much at stake at this. The question that has to be asked is, have we seen this before? Has history, is there a place in history where we've seen this before? And the other question that comes out of this, all right, so the word evil is in there. What are Christians to do with this? Even Dr. Dobson has tried to play this down by writing articles of Donald Trump's recent conversion to Christ. And if that is true, and who am I to judge that, then we have to look at it that he's a baby Christian, and I've never known anybody to be born full grown. You go through a growing process. But even with that, some of the statements that he's made recently certainly indicate that he's got growing pains, and he has stepped on some things here. Anyway, nice to have John Mittendorf with us, and we're talking with the subject, should Christians vote for the lesser of two evils? Okay. What do we do with this?
Here we go.
Help me, Coach.
Well, you know, it's interesting that as I studied for this period, I went back into history, and it's interesting. We tend to think, and I think you've heard this a lot on the political programs, that this is probably the most contentious election in the history of the presidential elections, and it's divisive. And 2/3 of the people in the country believe the country is going the wrong direction. And yet, we have two candidates that both of them are highly flawed, as you just said. Yeah. So then how do I vote? And of course, out of that, then you a lot of times hear the fact, well, I don't really want to vote for either one because, as you just said, they're both evil, so how do I vote for the lesser of two evils? Or I'm not going to vote because a single vote doesn't make much of a difference, so then really why should I participate, and I'll just wait till things get a lot better, well, which they may not get a lot better.
I think there's two things here I just want to plug in. A no vote is a vote. And I think the other thing that we're doing, and I don't know where you're going to go with this, but I think there is another moral, spiritual, civic responsibility, because there's other people on the ballot that deserve your consideration.
Right.
And there's some key issues that really need your prayerful consideration. All right, so that's my political commentary. I'm going to step aside. You straighten me out.
As it's interesting, as I went back in history, I discovered that if you go back to 1876, there was also another highly contentious election, and that was between Tilden and Hayes of Ohio. Mm-hmm. And of course, they had to appoint a special committee to finally decide which one, which kind of takes us back to 2000, which was Bush and Gore, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of similarities. But I think this one has stepped past that, and then the evilness of it. And when I say the evil, I mean the decisiveness and the acrimonious debate between the two, and a lot of people are really split on what they're going to do about that. But I want to go back to the concept, just briefly, Perry, of a single vote will not make a substantial difference, and that is false.
Okay, I'm not sitting in Congress. No, but let me put it back. The first time I read for chairman of the state, I missed it by one vote.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And 749 votes kept me out of the first election for Congress. Mm-hmm. On a special election, and I won't go through all that, I missed it by 5 votes.
Right.
So don't tell me a single vote doesn't work.
Well, I did a little research, and this is interesting. By 1 vote, Texas was admitted to the Union.
Wow.
The U.S. House of Representatives elected Thomas Jefferson as president by 1 vote, and Hitler won leadership of the German Nazi Party by 1 vote. So don't tell me that 1 vote can't make a difference.
Wow.
Yeah. And then also another thing that you hear, I think, consistently is, well, I'm not really a majority, I won't vote because the majority rules. True or false statement?
False.
That's a false statement, because it's the majority of those who vote that rule.
Right.
In fact, if you go back, Thomas Jefferson said, we do not have a government by a majority of the people, we have a government by a majority of the people who participate
right.
or vote.
Right.
So, is your vote important? And then if you take that into the evangelical community, by the way, a lot of what we're talking about this morning and today also applies either to evangelicals or non-evangelicals. I mean, both step into the voting booth and pull the lever, so to speak. Right. But when you apply that to evangelicals, and I know you've heard this before, in the 2012 presidential election, when 25 million evangelicals who were registered to vote did not vote,
right.
All right?
Gave us Barack Obama's 2nd term.
That is right. The difference in the 2012 popular vote was less than 5 million votes and was instrumental in Obama being re-elected over Mitt Romney.
Right.
It's interesting. And I would call that evangelical withdrawal. You know, when evangelicals
Being
don't.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying. Well, you're my hero. I'm
nobody's hero. You're just being nice. Thank you for using polite words on Christian broadcasting.
Evangelical withdrawal. Now, let me overview that just for a minute. About 50% of Christians in America are registered to vote.
Right.
And I know you've been over these facts and figures.
This is good stuff. Yeah.
Of those, only 50% show up at the polls. And you know, that's a staggering percentage.
Right.
50%, which means 75% of all Christians not taking advantage of one of their greatest privileges, or 25% of the registered Christians really show up to vote.
Right.
If you want to look at that from a statistical standpoint.
And if you look at numbers as a whole, the largest minority group, I say minority, is that right? Potentially the largest impacting group is the evangelical community.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So, if evangelicals vote, could they dramatically tilt an election to candidates with like goals and viewpoints?
Every time.
Every time. Every time.
Every time.
That's exactly right. What would have happened if the evangelicals would have voted in 2012?
Well, Mitt Romney would be president.
You'd have had Mitt Romney as president. Exactly right. So that brings us to the program this morning, then, with a quick introduction.
Yeah.
And I want to cover briefly 5, I think, areas that directly apply to our subject. And I want to start off with the U.S. Constitution.
Go for it.
All right. As you know, the U.S. Constitution places power to govern in the hands of the elected representatives. But what's interesting is power is returned to us, the voters, at periodic intervals. I'm just going to say every 4 years from a presidential election. And so the authors of the Constitution set the electoral responsibility squarely on the shoulders of each American citizen who is eligible to vote. And I think a great summary of that is to ignore this responsibility is to declare to our founding fathers that they should not have been so foolish as to entrust us with the maintenance of our freedoms. Powerful statement. It's a powerful statement. In 1774, the Continental Congress wrote this, Perry: "It is an indispensable duty which we owe to God, our country, ourselves, and prosperity, by all faithful ways and means in our power to maintain, defend, and preserve these civil and religious rights and liberties for which many of our fathers fought, bled, and died, and to hand them down to future generations." That's us. Which begs the question, do we, the people of the United States of America, exercise our right to reclaim our power on the regular intervals, we just talked about that, that's handed to us by the Constitution, they're established by our Constitution, and are we doing all we can to ensure that the decision makers in Washington and in our state capitals share our values, our vision, and our beliefs? Now here's my question. If I don't vote, how do I fulfill that mandate?
You don't.
I don't.
You forfeit it.
I forfeit that mandate.
Yeah.
And if I do that, then in a lot of cases, the devil wins by default.
Right. Yeah, and I think you need to understand, you got to go back to the Declaration of Independence. You can go back to the Magna Carta, Mayflower Impact, and some others, but you'll find out that you are here because the rights that you have been given to you by God. And what our forefathers wanted more than anything was the power to be in the hands of the people. That's right, it returns to us every 2 years, actually.
Yes.
The reason it returns to us every 2 years is so that we can vote this out. Now, one of the interesting things in this campaign cycle is, and it's glad to hear it come back up, I don't know if it'll stick, but is the term called term limits.
Right.
So we don't turn public service into a career.
Into a career, right.
You turn it into public service.
Right, right.
Yeah. Excuse me, I'm preaching at you.
No,
Don't get me going, but you are. But go ahead. This is good stuff. By the way, folks, if you want these notes, these notes, it is terrific. Go to hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. Hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. The whole thing we're talking about, we're not going to get through all of this today, but the whole thing we're talking about is in notes. Get them today and share them with your family and friends. His People Rejoice. Ask for the notes of the lesser of two evils. Go ahead.
Let's cover the next one real quick before we take a break.
Right.
And the first one was the Constitution. The second one, I said we had 5 areas.
Yeah.
Are Christians mandated to vote?
I would say we are.
By the Bible, directly, no. Indirectly, yes. But I would say it leans more towards the directly than it does the indirectly. Let me explain.
Yeah.
The Bible does not specifically mandate Christians to vote. You can't bring up a verse that says, thou shalt vote.
Right.
However, does the Bible mandate Christians to be a godly influence in a dark, secular world?
Yes.
Yes, it does. Matthew 5:13 through 16, which is the famous, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world, a city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does they light a lamp, and so on. So basically, what does that mean, Perry? That means that Christians can have a formidable, preserving influence in the world as they can retard moral and spiritual decay and prevent the entire earth, and I'm going to say governmental entities, from degenerating faster than they already are.
Right.
If we don't vote, we have absolutely no impact on that whatsoever. All right? So I think it's our duty. I think you can biblically say it's our duty to vote for leaders who will promote Christian principles by minimizing the impact of evil in the world, particularly our government, which brings up 2 major concepts. Concepts number 1. Christians should vote as led through number 1, prayer.
Right.
Number 2, the study of both God's Word. And 3, the realities of the choices on the ballot.
Okay. Now,
let me summarize that by saying when voting between the lesser of 2 evils, vote for the candidate that, : okay, whose personal principles and platforms most nearly agree with your own Christian position that is based on the Bible. Number 2, if that is not possible, and a lot of people think that we're there today when we step into the booth on November 8th, if not possible, then vote for the candidate that is most likely, let me repeat those 2 words, most likely to lead this country in a positive direction. Any questions?
Okay.
And you know what's interesting, Perry? When the signers of the Declaration of Independence signed their names to that document, they were well aware that the British could execute them as traitors if the colonial, if the colonial people failed for any reason. And I look at that from this concept. If the Founding Fathers were that dedicated to the cause of freedom, any less dedication on our part could result in a loss of freedom for which they and thousands upon thousands of people have died to preserve our freedom and our ability to vote.
All right, let me take a break here. There's another question that kind of comes into my mind. Dealing with what we're dealing with in this election cycle, and you're frustrated, and a lot of people are. One of the questions I ask people to ask, what are the alternatives? What are the alternatives of not voting for this person and voting for this person? Or what are the alternatives of not voting at all?
Right.
And there are significant alternatives.
Alternatives.
All right, let me take a break. John Mittendorf's with us. By the way, all of this, folks, is put into an handsome note for you, absolutely free. Go to hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com and ask for the notes today, Lesser of Two Evils, and he'll send them out to you right away. Get copies of this today, and then read it yourself and share it with family and members and friends through the weekend. Pastors, you may want to print this out and have it available at your church. Go to hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. We'll come back and we'll deal with, does God use secular rulers to further his purposes? Oh boy, is this going to be fun.
Another
we'll be right
good
back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
All right, welcome back to Focus Today, and delighted to have with me John Mittendorf. We're going through an incredible study, and let me say this, I apologize if you misunderstand me. You have to email John. You have to email him. It's not a website, it's an email address, hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. That's an email address. And ask for the notes today, The Lesser of Two Evils. They're very comprehensive, they're excellent. It even has a comparison on some of the issues of the candidates in the back. Go to email John at hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com and get these today and print them out. Share them with your friends. Pastors, this is very safe material. You may want to take a look at it yourself. Again, email John at hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. Right, you're dealing with 5
pages. Those pages, Perry, you talked about printing them out for a church or whatever. They're 10 pages long. Or you can cut out the bibliography in the back and make it 9 pages, so they'd be easily reprintable.
Whatever you want. Go to email them at hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. All right, number 3 here.
Number 3.
All right.
Does God use secular rulers to further his purposes? You hear this, I can't vote for either one of these because they're both evil and we're going to have an evil leader of the country. And to a large degree, when you look at the Bible, the Old Testament is full of secular, and I'm talking about idol-worshiping kings that knew nothing about God, but God stepped in and used those to further his purposes. In fact, 2 great verses are Daniel 2:21. He changes times and seasons, he deposes kings and raises up others, he gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. What's that tell you?
God's involved.
God's in control. Exactly right. Romans 13:1. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that existed have been established by God. To me, that means, Perry, that whoever wins this election come November 8th is put there by God, according to that verse. Okay. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. Okay, now, so if we do then have 2, I'm going to say, candidates that people are highly worried about. If you go back to the Old Testament, look at King Nebuchadnezzar, classic example. But I think one of the best examples is King Cyrus, who was a secular king, a non-Israelite, an idol worshiper, and he was used as God's servant to rebuild the temple. And not only did God use him to rebuild the temple, he financed the project.
Yeah.
That's right.
And he called him. Listen to this. God called King Cyrus, who was a pagan king and didn't believe, his anointed.
Right. Let me read that verse, Perry. Interesting. That's Isaiah 45, verses 1 through 4. Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held. This is an idol-worshiping king, right? And then if you go down through the 4 verses, when you come to the end of the 4th verse, I have even called you by your name, I have named you, though you have not known me. Right. But yet, Cyrus, I'm going to use you to rebuild the temple of my people. And oh, by the way, Cyrus, get out your wallet because you're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And he did.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, what's the moral to the story? Let God be God, right? Vote, and then let God, meaning it's up to him to do what he wants to do with the candidate that we elect. Okay. Pretty simple. Number 4, open rejection of God and godly values. Your previous guest made an interesting comment that she believed that the country is going downhill. And I think a lot of that has to do with America's open rejection of God.
Right.
In fact, and let me make this available also with these notes for the people that are listening or watching, that we did a program maybe, I don't know, 10, 11 months ago, Has God Taken His Hand Off the United States? You remember that program?
Right, I do.
If people want the notes on that, I'd be happy to send those with these also. Has God Taken His Hand Off the United States? But as you know, the country was founded on godly principles and values, which has consistently been in a steady decline. And I think we've reached the point that you now see an open and aggressive rejection of God from various areas. And if you look at Jeremiah 1:16, this should concern every American citizen. And Jeremiah says, I will pronounce my judgments on my people because of their wickedness in forsaking me.
Mm-hmm. I'm not saying today is a win-all election or a save-all election.
No.
But it could be a turning
point
back.
Direction. Could be.
Yeah.
Let me give you a couple of examples and then bring up one question that I think is a blockbuster. First of all, and this is no surprise, 1973 Supreme Court case Roe versus Wade. Since then, over 59 million abortions have been performed in the United States from 73 to today, 2016. Proverbs 6:16 through 17, this does the Lord hate, hands that shed innocent blood. On June 1963, Supreme Court ruled reading the Bible and prayer in public schools was forbidden. The phrase America versus the Ten Commandments summarizes the ongoing effort to remove the Ten Commandments, nativity scenes, and Christmas carols, which has been responsible for the deepening anti-God secularization of America. But I think one of the things at the head of that list is the unapologetic and brash example of rejecting God that was publicly exhibited during the 2008 and 2012 National Democratic Party convention platforms.
Yeah, they denounced God. Booed him.
Booed him. Exactly right.
Yeah.
In fact, you know, to be fair, that in 2012, God was reinserted briefly back into the platform because of the outcry. But 2008, it was not. But if you go back to the 2012 platform, Perry, you have the affirmation of open sex. You have government-provided contraception. Remember Sandra Fluke? You have approval of abortion. That's murder. And the removal of God from the platform have characterized, I think, the current Democratic Party as the anti-God party. Which brings up, I think, a blockbuster question. And let me phrase this very carefully. How can an evangelical Christian who supports godly values vote for a Democratic candidate who supports, and there's a key word, who supports the current Democratic platform?
It's a mystery to me.
I don't see how you can do it. On the one hand, I'm an evangelical Christian. I believe the Bible. I support the Bible. I support the principles and the values in the Bible. But yet I'm going to support a political candidate who is totally against that. I don't see how you can do that.
Pretty plain.
Pretty plain.
Yeah, I got about 2.5 minutes.
Let's talk about absolutes just real quick, and then if we need to finish up, we can finish up in a week or so. And I think many voters are voting against it. In fact, I think you've heard this phrase quite a bit, that many voters today are voting for 2016, are voting against a candidate instead of
for a candidate,
which is interesting. And you also hear the phrase, is this the best that America has to offer?
Right.
So the American voting system, in the American voting system, a citizen is an office that also shoulders the responsibility for the actions of our government. As we talked about when we started this morning, Perry, in that if we don't shoulder that responsibility, which has been given to us by the Constitution, then who is?
Well, I like the phrase you said, John, and you've been warning us all morning or all during this discussion today, and that is that the power of the people returns to them every 2 years. In this case, every 4 years when it comes to the presidency. The power of the people is now being returned back into the hands of the people, and what you do with it between now and November 8th, I think is a godly responsibility and obligation. And if you do nothing with it, are you the guy that took the talent and just buried it?
Yep, exactly right.
You know? Thank you. By the way, we're out of time, but let me say this. Email John right now hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com and ask for the notes on the lesser two evils. Again, email him at hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com and he'll send you the file and you can print it out. It's about 10 pages, and we'll follow up on this in a couple of days. Thanks,
Yeah,
buddy.
let's continue this November 4th.
Okay. Now go now. Email him at hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. Print these out, share them with your family and friends, and maybe make them available in your church this weekend. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.